Alien in my own backyard. And such a civic-minded one, too.
I think he means what he says, Lex.
Well, that's just dandy, Lois. All I know is your hero did nothing to help me. I'm the one who's out a billion-dollar battlesuit.
Actually, this could end up a silver lining in your pocket, couldn't it?
What's that?
Now that the terrorists have your prototype, the Pentagon is undoubtedly going to want you to build a bigger and better version for them. When all is said and done, this could net you a multi-billion-dollar windfall.
Lois, it almost sounds as if your friend here is suggesting I should be glad my suit was stolen. You're very amusing, Mr. Kent, is it? Yes, I'll remember that.
Nice work, Smallville. You're only the second person I've ever seen get under Lex's skin.
Who's the first?
Me, when I dumped him.
Whoa.
Ancient history. Anyway, what makes you think Lex might have been an accessory to the theft?
I don't think it was a theft. I think he gave it away.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming back another returning guest. This is your fourth time back, I think, Stacy. How you doing?
Yeah, fourth time. Yeah, I feel pretty good. Good. Always glad to be here.
Always glad to have you back. Stacy Dooks, by the way, in case didn't make that clear. It's funny having you back on so quickly because almost exactly before you messaged me about coming back on, I had re-listened to the episode that we did on Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was a good one. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So definitely go back and listen to that one if you haven't yet. But today we're going to be talking about another animated movie. Although before we get into that, one of the things I've been doing lately, especially with returning guests, is kind of asking you guys what kind of thing is really kind of like grabbing your interest right now. It can be geeky related, doesn't have to be though, but what is kind of like, what are you getting kind of interested in now?
Well, the recent Doctor Who special, The Power of the Doctor, I watched that. That was really fun. Jodie Whittaker's last bow as the 13th Doctor. And they're setting the stage for the return of the debut of the next fellow to play the character. I believe his name is Ncuti. I forget what his name is. Bear with me here. I'm man. I am not always hip to the jive. Ncuti Gatwa. He's going to be the next one, but the wrinkle is the end of the special. Do you want spoilers? Do you mind?
I'm not a Doctor Who guy, so go
not
right
a big
ahead.
Doctor Who guy.
Yeah.
Well, they have Jodie Whittaker have this epic regeneration sequence at the end of the adventure because it's her time to go, and when she finishes the regeneration sequence, it's David Tennant.
Mm-hmm.
And something has clearly gone wrong where he's like, I know these teeth. And then he looks at his outfit, which is kind of the same as his old outfit. He's just like, what? And so that's going to be the thread between Jodie Whittaker and Ncuti Gatwa is going to be a couple of the specials featuring David Tennant. So yeah, it's an interesting swerve to say the least. So I was pretty fascinated by that. And yeah, it was a fun special. A lot of nostalgia service. If you're a longtime Doctor Who fan, they're setting up for it'll be the 60th anniversary, I think, of Doctor Who come November 2023. So that's going to be a pretty big milestone. But like with all things, my fandom is cyclical. Like sometimes I'll be really into Star Trek. Sometimes I'll be really into Star Wars. The Andor show, also really fascinating. That is easily some of the best Star Wars I've seen in a while.
That's what a lot of people have been saying.
Yeah, because it's basically Tony Gilroy and Diego Luna, who not only plays Cassian Andor and produces it. Their team has come up with the idea of doing like, okay, this is Star Wars, but it's the prestige format series. It's more catered to older audiences. This is more for adults, and it's a really interesting exploration of life under a fascist regime, but it's using Star Wars as kind of the sugar pill to kind of bring this in. I mean, you could argue that George Lucas basically gave us all as kids, like Fisher Price anti-fascist kit
Right.
in the
Yeah.
form
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
original trilogy. So, but yeah, this has been it's been a really fascinating series, and so yeah, so those things have been kind of on my mind. How about you? Anything grabbing you lately?
So I just want to comment a few things on what you said
Oh
first.
yeah,
Yeah. I've been hearing so much good things about Andor because
Mm.
the Star Wars. I've never been like a big Star Wars guy, right? Like
fair.
I enjoyed the original trilogy, but I'm not like it never kind of grabbed me the way that it grabbed a lot of other people, even though I did see it when I was a kid. But it was one of those things where I was kind of like, yeah, it's cool, but was never really like hardcore Star Wars guy. Same thing with like and so like some of the newer stuff that's been coming out lately, like I love The Mandalorian. I watched like the
Absolutely.
first episode of Book of Boba Fett, and I didn't watch any more after that because not because I didn't like
Fair.
it, but it just didn't grab me. I didn't
Grab
feel
you.
the need. I watched Obi-Wan and I like that. So yeah, I've been just kind of holding off on Andor, but that's something I should probably check out now because from what everyone's saying, it's probably definitely like in my kind of wheelhouse of interest.
Yeah, it's very much a slow burn, but it's worth the trip as far as I'm concerned.
And Doctor Who, that was another thing that I had never had that in my childhood. That was never a thing growing up. Every now and then I'd hear someone talk about Doctor Who here and there. I'm like, what is that? And just like nothing else came of it. And then probably when I first came to Japan, actually, I had a friend from Scotland who she loved Doctor Who. So she gave me like the not quite legally procured seasons of the reboot with what was that, Eccleston?
Eccleston started, and then Tennant took over after.
Yeah, so I saw the Eccleston stuff, and I saw some of the Tennant stuff, not too much of it. But yeah, and it was entertaining enough. But again, just one of the things that never just kind of grabbed me. So those are like the two. Doctor Who, especially, is like this big blind spot in my fandom.
Totally fair. I actually inherited my Doctor Who fandom from my uncle, who was a big Tom Baker fan. Like he would watch the show on the Boston PBS station when we lived back in Nova Scotia, and he was a captain on oil tankers. So he would tape a bunch of them when they had those marathons on PBS, like, we need your support. And so they would run like Doctor Who marathons of entire serials and back to back to back. And so I kind of watched them and I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew that there was a cool robot dog on that show. And I was like, I want to see more with the robot dog. Cause this was around the same time I was watching Battlestar Galactica on VHS. And so I already knew what Daggett was. And I'm like, what is this? And the character of K9 kind of got me into it. And as I grew older, I would just watch more and more reruns on syndication and just kind of got into it. It just kind of became one of those things I kind of absorbed through a little bit of osmosis. So
that was kind of like me with the Bond stuff, because my dad was a huge James Bond guy, and so and my brother had a video store at the time, so he made copies from Laserdisc of like the Connery Bond movies, put them all on like one deluxe VHS cassette. So it was just like, I remember watching that damn thing with my dad like endless times. So like those first three Bond movies especially are like seared into my memory because of that. And that really kind of started me on Bond. So that was very similar thing with the osmosis stuff. But the thing that I've been kind of into lately, I haven't had a whole lot of time lately just because I've started a new workout regime, and so I've been going to the gym like 3 days a week, and then combine that with just like work and all this kind of stuff. And I started a new gig working with a small comic publisher, doing some lettering work for them. So it's been really busy lately. So I haven't had a lot of time, but the time I have had, are you a video game guy at all?
A little bit. I mean, I'm not as hardcore as some, but I dip in and out.
Yeah, same thing. But have you ever played the Yakuza games?
I have heard of them, but I haven't played them. I think they're similar to Grand Theft Auto, right? Kind of in that same vein of like.
Yeah, it's this interesting mix between like Grand Theft Auto and like JRPG set in Japan. And it's if you ever played the Persona games, though, it's much more similar to those, probably like very kind of like confined location. It's not the kind of
not an open world, yeah,
right? Not or it is in a way, but not as sprawling as like the GTA stuff is. It's not the same as like a lot of the sandbox games, but it's there's a new one out now. So the series in Japanese is called Ryuga Gotoku, which translates as like a dragon. And so they had the original series, which I think was like 6 or 7 games, and featuring like that protagonist. And I never played all the way through, but of the Japanese one. And so I've been playing. They had it for free as part of the PlayStation Plus subscription a few months back. So I got it, downloaded it. And it put them into this kind of bliss, over the top setting. So it's a lot of fun.
Sounds interesting. Yeah,
it is. It's really interesting. And so I've been playing that, dipping into that in and out over the past like 2 or 3 weeks or so. So that's kind of like been my thing since She-Hulk ended, because She-Hulk was my last big was really into.
Yeah, the last big kind of streaming thing to follow, and it was quite interesting.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Oh, that was so much fun. But today we're talking, as usual, when we have you on, we're talking about a DC animated project, and you had an idea to, instead of talking about, it's not technically a movie, but in a way it kind of is. It's the first 3 episodes of Superman the Animated Series, which is a 3-parter titled The Last Son of Krypton, and it basically is kind of like a Superman origin story movie.
Yes, I will argue that it is a technicality, as it was released on a clamshell VHS as a film that you could rent from Blockbuster.
We'll allow.
Counselor, I realize I'm on shaky ground, Your Honor, but please allow me to present this to the court as it is. Probably, in my estimation, the best take on a Superman movie that we've had. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Superman the movie, the 1978 Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve film. I love it to pieces. But if you sat me down in an interrogation room and you put the hot lights on me and you said, Stacy, what is objectively the best Superman movie? And you lined them all up, I have to say that as much as Superman the movie from 1978 might be my favorite, I think the best one is this one right here, and it's quite good in my estimation.
See, that's a good question. I'm not sure what I would pick as the best one if we're having live action and animated stuff all together. I think I might lean more towards Superman versus the Elite, or Superman Unbound. I thought was really good too.
Okay, Unbound, I've heard good things about. I've yet to pull the trigger on, so I might have to watch it sometime, and then see if I have to reorganize things. So,
I mean, there's also All-Star Superman as well. That's
All-Star Superman kind of exists off in its own thing, because it's so good. It's hard to. It would be like, expecting,
that's a very particular kind of Superman. It's not as quite as. Like, if you're looking for more of a modern day take on Superman, then I would not give you All-Star Superman. But if you're, you're right. That's it's a very specific type of Superman. Yeah. If I was, but I think it would probably be a toss up between Superman versus the Elite or Superman Unbound. For me. So let's go back and let's talk about Superman the Animated Series for a little bit. What's your history with this show?
Oh man, like growing up in Nova Scotia, we were watching Batman the Animated Series for the longest time and having a great time with it, as of course Batman the Animated Series is one of the greatest of all.
Yes.
But when we heard that they were doing a Superman show, I immediately stopped dead in my tracks, because I am a huge Superman nerd. So I was stoked to watch it, and I watched it when it was coming out on TV. I believe it was part of that whole brief period of where the Warner Brothers shows were on Fox for some reason. Like, you would see them occasionally with the Fox Kids lineup or something similar to that, or Kids WB.
Kids
Yes,
WB.
Kids
That
WB. I
and
remember that.
yeah, with
Yeah.
at least that's what it was
Mhm.
in my area. It was on Kids WB.
Yeah,
which
Kids
was on,
WB.
yeah.
Yeah. And so we would see it there, and then eventually they packaged them both into the new Superman Batman adventures, because that was
Right.
around the time of season 4. And they did the world's finest movie with the redesigned Batman looks, which was pretty good. The
Oh,
Joker
yeah.
was a little janky.
Yeah,
but
those
yeah.
those redesigns were weird because there were some that were
Mhm.
like completely on point. Like the Batman
Mhm.
design was such a step up. The Bruce Wayne
Mhm.
design too, such a step up. Like I hated that
Mhm, mhm.
frumpy brown suit thing.
Yeah.
But when it came to some of the other ones, like Robin, I couldn't tell. I didn't understand why they took all the green out of his costume. I didn't like that,
Mhm.
and I also didn't like what they did to Tim Drake. It like that was just
Oh,
Jason
yeah.
Todd called and Tim Drake's my favorite Robin, so like that always
Yeah.
hurt me.
Yeah, it was.
And like yeah, some of the some of the villain designs were just off. Like you had Penguin was a nice redesign. They brought it back to the more
Mhm.
classic look. But like with the Joker, I don't know why they got rid of his red lips. They had the black eyes. They did a nice merger when they brought him in on Justice League, though. That was the nice.
Yes,
that was like
that
the
was a
best
nice
version.
combination of the creepier elements. The look for season 4 of Batman the Animated Series was interesting. It was a unique design, but ultimately I think it didn't serve. It made him a little too cartoony.
Mhm.
Like the Joker should always have this. He should always appear to be, fanciful,
Right.
but there should be this underlying current of menace that they got back to in Justice League.
Yes, absolutely.
But some designs were great. I mean, Scarecrow. They took
Scarecrow was the one that I
Scarecrow-
was like really kind of because I like the design, but I don't
Mm.
feel that it suits that character.
I feel it's interesting, and I do like it the pairing with Jeffrey Combs. So I think
Mhm.
they've actually they did a good job in making him actually intimidating. And the Mr. Freeze redesign.
The Mr.
was
Freeze
very
one
cool.
was on point. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And the designs for the Superman characters are also really good in that they evoke the Fleischer cartoon
Mhm.
so well. I mean, they already did that with Batman the Animated Series, but this was where they really had a chance to cut loose and really did some unique redesigns, like both for, Superman himself, some of the stuff still stayed mostly classic.
Mhm.
I mean, Jimmy Olsen got a kind of a 90s kid glow up. He got the mullet and they lost the
Right,
bow
yeah,
tie and the camera.
Which I thought was I like
Yeah.
what they did with Jimmy. I thought that it made so much more
Yeah.
sense. I mean, I wouldn't understand why like this teenage or college age
Mhm.
kid who is walking around with the sweater vest and bow tie.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't quite do it except in kind of like in Batman, the Brave and the Bold, they do that because every character is supposed to be their idealized Silver Age self. So
Right,
you can
yeah.
get away with that. But yeah, the designs were pretty good. The New Gods, when they brought in the New Gods, holy moly. Like
One thing I will
Wow,
say about
those
the
designs.
Superman design is I didn't like
Mhm.
that they didn't have blue eyes. Right? Because
Yeah,
that's such an
fair.
iconic part of Superman, and I feel like
Mhm.
that was a big missed op, especially because it's not like they couldn't do it because they did it with Batman with Bruce Wayne in the
Yeah.
season 4.
Yeah, it's definitely a wrinkle. I'm a bit more of a hardliner. My main thing was like, where's the yellow S? Where's the yellow S on his cape?
There was a reason for that because
Yeah, because the
it's-
animation couldn't
yeah,
quite-
because it's too difficult to animate the cape with the yellow S. So that's why also more the modern after Superman Returns, like all the movies, Superman Returns
Mhm.
on because they use CGI capes with the flying sequences, and they can't, and it's so difficult
Yeah,
if you have that
it's-
yellow S in the back.
I know. It's just part of me is just like that design is just so iconic that part of me just misses it. Just a little hardline part of me that
Mhm.
just can't quite let it go. But yeah, and the fact that Alan Burnett, Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, the whole team, they basically took Batman the Animated Series, the notes they did that, and they didn't necessarily do a complete 180, but they did a nice 90-degree
Mhm.
pivot where a lot of that design and a lot of that, especially with Metropolis, like I particularly enjoy, the Gotham of the animated series is very much inspired by the Anton Furst designs from the movie where hell has burst from the pavement.
Mhm.
But Metropolis is the city of tomorrow, and it's like heaven has descended from the clouds. Like it just looks, it's really good. It's bright, it's shiny, it's got all those iconic, like the Daily Planet globe looks amazing. Like they just put in the work in the
Mhm.
designs, and the designs of Krypton are unique. And we'll talk about Krypton in a bit
Mhm.
because the first episode is basically Superman's nowhere to be
Entirely
found.
on
He's a
Krypton.
baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the designs are great, and just the aesthetic of the show. They got the assignment. They understood that if Batman the animated series is like, some like crime and the underworld and dealing with these costume supervillains, the Superman one deals with that as well, but it's much more bright and optimistic and upbeat, and really makes for a nice contrast between the two. So
Yeah,
quite like
yeah,
it.
absolutely, yeah. Now, one of the things about this show, and I think one of the big differences between this and Batman the Animated Series is Batman felt like it borrowed from a lot more different eras of the comics history,
Mhm.
whereas Superman the Animated Series seemed to be heavily drawing on the John Byrne revamp from the Post Crisis. What are your thoughts on that revamp on Man of Steel?
Well, I liked the revamp on Man of Steel. I actually was reading Superman comics in 1986 when Crisis happened. So I actually read Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And then I was like, well, this is the last Superman story. Obviously, everything's over. Like, we're done, aren't we? And and then when they relaunched with Man of Steel, it was a revelation. I mean, the John Byrne, Jerry Ordway, Marv Wolfman, that whole stable coming together and rebooting the Superman franchise. I think it was a necessary move, because I think a lot of barnacles had accumulated along the hull. Granted, a lot of that stuff came back because a lot of people have a lot of affection for things like, the Bottled City of Kandor, Supergirl,
Right.
Crypto, the Superdog, that kind of stuff. But I do think that initial, like, okay, this is the break. This is what we're going to do. It's just Superman. He's the only survivor of Krypton. He's not as godlike as he was in the Silver and Bronze Age. This is a Superman who can get hurt, who can get injured in the course of his duties. And they established very much that he was not disguised as Clark Kent. Clark was the real person. Kal-El/Superman was the disguise. And Lex Luthor as the billionaire mogul was a smart play, because how many times can Lex Luthor escape prison and put on that purple and green armor and fight Superman in the street? So they had to do some things, and I quite liked the redesign. The Bizarro story in that one is really good. I quite enjoyed it.
There are some issues that I have with Man of Steel. I mean, there's some changes that I really love. I love the like you said, Lex Luthor. I love what they did with making him a businessman. Although, if you look at like the 80s and the early 90s Lex, I think they brought him too much into Kingpin territory. I felt like he didn't quite have that intelligence. And he also was, a little bit too much of a bastard, right? It was kind of like, he was just, and there was like no redeeming qualities. When we got into like the President Luthor area, which is when I started reading Superman comics regularly, and then probably from influence from Smallville as well with Michael Rosenbaum, I thought they did a good job of giving Luthor some sympathetic qualities, which really helped his character a lot. But like when I go back and I read like the Byrne Superman or the early 90s Triangle era, like it is hard to read the Lex stuff just because he's like so much of a bastard. It's like there's not one redeeming thing about him.
Yeah. There's no redeeming qualities in him whatsoever. And I think that also stems from the fact that they decided to break with the previous convention of like Clark and Lex having known each other in Smallville.
Right. Yeah.
So they instead, they broke from that, and they broke away from the redeeming elements that I do think worked to the detriment of the character, and just kind of made him like an evil corporate mogul. They didn't really play into his being a mad scientist until you started getting into the clone arc, where we got Lex Luthor II, and then, somehow he managed to finagle his way out of all that after the whole Neuron thing. He got his body back. Comics. But I do think that, I think you're onto something there, because there's that great moment in the Grant Morrison Howard Porter JLA when it's during, I think it's the Injustice for All arc, but there's a moment where Superman says to Lex, goodbye, Lex, there's a good man in there somewhere. And Lex is like, you think so, do you? And just like that relationship that they have, I've always felt, there's a great Superman story from the Further Adventures of Superman, which is a prose anthology. And Superman, he's at the end of time, near the end of time. And like, he asks one question of this Oracle, because he's been on a quest. And he's just like, will Lex and I ever be friends again? And the Oracle says one day.
Mm.
And it's just like, that's great. The tragedy of their friendship is one of the things that I think they brought back really well in Mark Waid's Superman Birthright.
Yeah, I felt like
yeah.
Birthright, it didn't touch on it as much as I wish it
Mhm.
had. Like there was, it was because they had, and I think part of it just because they were so hamstrung by what was because it was supposed to fit into the existing continuity.
Yeah,
so you had
a
this
lot of
thing where like,
gymnastics.
so where Lex pretends like he was never in Smallville and he never knew Clark and all that kind of stuff. So that was taking things a little bit too far, I thought. But I like the idea behind it, though. This idea that they were friends before they had this connection, and I wish we could have. If I was going to be relaunching Superman, I would be running with that idea, the fact that Clark and Lex know each other, were friends, you know, and playing with that idea, because I think that's such an interesting dynamic to explore.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Joe Casey's Adventures of Superman run?
I believe I was dipping in and out at that time. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd recently I'm not sure when it's going to be coming out, because I'm not sure what his schedule is compared to what the schedule of this show is, but I had reread it, and I was on Anthony Desiato's Digging for Kryptonite show, and so I read it for that, and we talked about it. And one of the things I really liked about that run was the way Casey depicted Luthor, because it was kind of like this. He was like this super intelligent, you know, it was in the president time too, but he also had a lot of sympathetic qualities. And I think Casey was definitely influenced by what was happening on Smallville at the time.
Yeah. I think that fundamentally Lex is on the cusp of being a genuinely good person, but he can't make the transition because his pride messes with him every time. And as far as Clark is concerned, if they're falling out, he never fell out with Lex. Lex just disappeared, and he dearly wants to have his friend back, and he doesn't understand why Lex is doing all this.
It's funny. I started rewatching Smallville recently, and when you're watching especially the early seasons, I'm watching this, and I'm just like, you know what? This is basically the series of this really nice guy, Lex Luthor, who comes to this town. He wants to use his money to help everybody. And everybody's a complete and total asshole to him. And it's no wonder he becomes a supervillain.
Exactly. Like the boulders just keep getting piled on and piled on and piled on until when he snaps, you totally understand.
Yeah, why. I'm rewatching. I'm like, Clark's an asshole. Lex is the hero of this show.
Exactly. Oh yeah, Smallville Clark. Oof. You want to take him aside and just be like, buddy, are you good? Are you all right? getting a little Brightburn in here.
Well, and to take it back to this show, I think one of the things that I think this series did really well for the time, because there was nothing else about Lex like this at the time, is they brought back that intellect. They also had a lot of charm with him. Clancy Brown's Lex Luthor is just like, he's so sinister, but he's so charming at the same time.
Oh my God, yes. And in this, he walks onto that stage, and he holds up his arms to get the audience to give him more applause. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's Lex Luthor in a nutshell. And of course he has the office that has the aquarium with a shark in it. Because it's Lex Luthor. Because of course he's going to do that. He's just that little bit extra. And the fact that his prototype weapon is called the Lexo Scale 5000. I'm like, oh, Lex. Oh, you can take the mad scientist out of the Silver Age, but you can't.
Although one of the things that I think was a missed opportunity is, I think they should have taken it a little step further and called it the Lexor and made it the same color scheme. I think that would have been a nice nod.
That would have been a nice nod, but I don't think they wanted to tip their hand that
soon. Yeah.
And I think that the payoff is a little better when we get to Justice League and he actually does build the suit.
That's true. Yeah.
That's a pretty great pop. But yeah, Lex in this, and Lois. I mean, Dana Delaney's Lois Lane. I'm just gonna say it. I'm coming in with all the hot controversial takes. This is the best Lois.
No, absolutely.
This is the best Lois.
I think
so good.
Although I think Bitsy Tulloch gives her a run.
She's from
Superman right? And Lois. Yeah.
Okay, fair. But if I if we had to run like it'd be neck and neck.
It'd
I
be
don't
neck
know.
and neck. It'd be
I
neck
don't.
and
I
neck.
don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
It'd be
But yeah.
anybody's ball game.
Oh yeah,
But-
but like
Mhm.
well, going back to All Star Superman, when we covered that on the show, and I was rewatching it, the entire time I'm rewatching it, and I'm keep thinking, I'm like, oh wait, no, it wasn't that. It was Mask of the Phantasm, right? Because Dana Delaney did the voice of Andrea Beaumont in that, and when I was watching it, I'm just like, that's Lois Lane.
Mhm.
This is really weirding me out now.
Yeah, and it's weird because when we're going to get to World's Finest, you have to accept this. But when we get to that, we get Dana Delaney and Kevin Conroy in another romantic entanglement.
Yeah.
So good, so good. But yeah, Lois is amazing.
Oh yeah, and like
Mhm.
one of my favorite moments in the animated series is and it's not these episodes, but it was the episode when Lana appears, and they get to the end of that episode, and Lana's like, and she tells him, she's like, Clark, you deserve someone who's nice and caring. Then you've got Lois's voice booming over. He's like, hey, Smallville, get your butt in here.
Their relationship is so great, and it develops so well over the course of the series. Again, this is another episode we won't talk about, but there's a whole bit where like, I don't get how you always manage to get these scoops, and Clark just crooks his finger and is like, well, actually, I'm secretly Superman, and I'm here just to look out for disasters, and then come in and rob you with a byline. And Lois Lane, without breaking a sweat, is just like, you're a sick man, Kent. And Clark's like, you asked. So great.
One thing also, an issue I had with the Byrne revamp was I like the idea that Clark is the real person and Superman is the disguise. But one of the things I think that got lost in there is they made things too good for Clark. Right? Clark has like, he was a football star. He was, he's this ace reporter. He's got all these women falling all over him. Like you had Lana in high school who was in love with him. You had Lori when he was in university. You had this other reporter who had like worked with him in Europe or something like that. Like all these women are like falling all over themselves to be with Clark Kent. And he's just like, he's super confident, almost overconfident. And I feel like that it detracts something when Clark has things go that good for him.
It's a bit like when Peter Parker becomes a billionaire. You're like, this can only end in fire,
right?
Which can only end in tragedy, which it did. Which the whole big time arc is sensational. But talking about Clark, I think the reason that they did that, what we're making Clark like, he's not mild mannered and beset upon like the Reeves Clark. They make him quiet and they make him investigative. Like they make him like
that's what this series I think did a really good job. Like in the Byrne comics, he's just arrogant, and he's way too overconfident. He's way too brash, and I don't like that about Clark Kent. I think Clark Kent should be someone who you don't notice him, right? Yeah. He's kind of like he's always, and that's what makes him a good investigative reporter is the fact that you could be. You could be like Stringer Bell and be like, are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy, tearing it apart? And then there's Clark Kent right over in the corner. He's like, goes over the trash can, picks it up. Right. Absolutely. You never realize he's there. That I think that's a good way. And I think it's a tragedy we didn't get to see more of Brandon Routh, because I think he played Clark kind of like that.
He did Superman a really good job. Yeah. He had the balance between them just perfect,
right?
And it was at once an homage to Reeves, but very much kind of its own animal, and
right? Yeah.
I think that sadly, I mean,
well, because I think Reeves's Clark went too far in the other direction, where it's like he's bumbling and he's tripping over himself, and it's like you can't help but notice that guy. And in both cases, that kind of detracts from the purpose of the Clark Kent of Metropolis Clark persona. It's supposed to be. The way I look at it is there are three versions of him, right? There's the real Clark, there's the Smallville Clark, the guy he is with Ma and Pa, the guy he is when he's with Lois and the boys, or Boy in the comics. And then there's Superman, and then there's Metropolis Clark, and that's the mild-mannered reporter with the glasses and the slick back hair. And that's I think what the Byrne comics didn't have a good handle on.
I think that plays into something that, maybe it was in the background, maybe it's just my read, but the Clark Kent of the Byrne era, the Superman of the Byrne era, is a guy who has had tremendous power thrust upon him and is kind of feeling that out. Like the first couple years of Superman's career in the post-crisis era, you watch him, kind of deal with the fact that, he gets the crap knocked out of him like multiple times. Like he earns that humility. And by the time he joins the Justice League, by the time he becomes the Superman of the Death of Superman, I think that his character has evolved to an extent. So I think that with Superman the animated series, they wanted a confident Clark Kent because they didn't want to make it, if you'll pardon the expression, too cartoony. So they kind of took their inspirations from George Reeves.
Yeah.
Like in terms of he looks good in a suit, he's here doing his reporter shtick. And yeah, I think that's kind of the balance they struck. And I think they largely stuck the landing with
I think they did too. Yeah. With this, because he's not overconfident, he's not too arrogant. He's got a quiet confidence.
Yes, he's got a quiet confidence.
Like he's in the background and he's just, but then every now and then he's got those little moments, like when Lois goes there and Angela says, "What, your paper needs to send 2 reporters," and she goes, and then she notices there's Clark, and then she goes over to him and she's like, "Hey, so what have you got?" And he's like, "Well, a shared byline," right? And he's got those moments when it just comes out of nowhere, and I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, the bit where he and we're kind of jumping all over the yard, but the bit when he's in the penthouse and he explains to Luthor, like Luthor's mad that the Lexoscale got stolen, and Clark points out that this could be a surprising financial windfall for you. They'll want you to build something. U.S. military will want you to build something even bigger and badder. And Lex is like, "That was amusing, Kent, is it? I'll remember that." Like just like such a great moment. And of course, if you notice, like the beauty of this series, this 3-parter, is that it sets up things that pay off all throughout the series. And every time that Luthor meets up with Clark, he always calls him Kent. It's so great. I love the little bits that are kind of peppered through this that kind of pay off later. So
one of the other things about the Byrne reboot that I didn't really like, and I didn't like that they kind of latched on here, was the depowering of Superman. I get why they did it, but I prefer Superman who is I prefer a more powerful Superman, not necessarily one who's juggling planets or anything like that, but
yeah,
I think he should be more powerful than the other superheroes. Otherwise, it's hard to kind of like see like why does he stand out.
I think ironically enough, the actual creators of like that era, like particularly, I think blanking on her name, Louise Simonson,
yeah.
Louise Simonson, John Bogdanovi, that whole era of Superman where they were really getting together. They had Professor Hamilton kind of explain Superman's powers prior to the fight with Doomsday, and explain that Superman's body is a giant solar capacitor. But the more he uses his power, the lower the tank gets. And that's what I think the series should start with, because unfortunately, Superman the animated series starts a pattern that gets picked up in Justice League, and it's defined on TV tropes as the Worf effect, where Worf on Star Trek The Next Generation would jump in and try to deal with the situation and would immediately get his ass handed to him because he's one of the toughest characters on the show. So you got to be like, so in Justice League, or even in Superman the animated series, the first big threat knocks Superman for a loop, because we have to show, oh shit, this is serious. Because otherwise, why are we here? Like, there's no jeopardy. The thing that I think that they could have done and probably should have done was show that Superman initially, when he's going at you that first time, yes, he is absolutely, you could drop a building on him, you could fire missiles at him, he'll just dust it off, no problem. But as the fight goes on, yes, he starts to have those moments where he does get knocked back in his ass, or like he does get beaten down, or you start to see blood or damage to the costume. Like, it just shows that if you keep him going, eventually you can wear him down to where he is in a position where he is more vulnerable. But that's just me from the cheap seat.
But anyway, let's talk about some of the beats of it. So, like you said, the first episode, it's like the first third of this is entirely set on Krypton. Now, if we're looking at this as a movie, right? And so looking at it as a movie, I think that's a problem when you've got the first third of it without the main character and it's completely set on Krypton.
Well, I would argue that, yeah, I mean, there's certainly a danger. We've seen in Man of Steel that you
Mhm.
can get a little lost out in the reeds there. But I do think that the beginning on Krypton is necessary because it does allow us to establish a couple things.
Mhm.
It does allow, for people who are like, well, yeah, I know Superman, but what's this take going to bring me? Because we
Right.
need that because it introduces us to the father-son inheritance of a
Mhm.
shared evil in the form of Corey Burton's Brainiac,
Mhm.
which is a magnificent character. And we get that. We get the depictions of Superman's, of baby Kal-El's life on Krypton.
Mhm.
Maybe you could probably shorten it by maybe about 5-10 minutes, like truncate it a little bit. But I do think that it serves a purpose, at least for this series, because, for a lot of like kids coming up in the 90s who maybe not didn't read
Mhm.
comics, they have no idea who Superman is. They've only ever watched Batman. So
Right.
this is their ground floor viewing. It might not work in an actual cinematic movie,
Mhm.
but yeah, I do like the bits. I like, action scientist Doc Savage-esque
Mhm.
Jor-El
No, I
going
think this is
around
a
and
good.
yeah.
This I
Mhm,
like. They did some nice things with Krypton here, where
mhm.
that was again something else I didn't like about the burn thing was they made Krypton too cold, too alien, and so it feels like, well, why would Clark even want a connection with this place?
Exactly.
And
It's a planet you want to blow up.
right, exactly, yeah, yeah. So this one they show it, and it's a nice place, right?
Mhm,
And they show Clark has a history there. He may not remember it, but he does have a
mhm.
history there. I also think that whole birthing matrix, so that he was quote unquote born on Earth, born in America, so he's an American citizen. I thought that
Yeah,
was just like that undercut the whole refugee aspect of Superman's story.
yeah, iffy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't like that. I like what they did here. So he's probably like what, like a year or 2 years old at this point, and he's
Mhm.
running around because he's walking, he's running around. Although, who knows, maybe babies in Krypton can start walking at 6 months.
Weird. Don't know.
Yeah. But we get to see that, Jor-El and Lara, they have personalities, which they did it
Yes,
in the Bird Run.
we actually get to have Laura have conversations with Jor-El
Yeah.
that last longer than like 3 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really good. But one of the things that is interesting about the Krypton arc is the fact that Jor-El has a plan, and it's not a
Mhm.
bad plan. Like
Yeah.
he's like, look, we put everybody in the Phantom Zone. We send one person in a spaceship to Earth. We get everybody out of the Phantom Zone,
Mhm.
and step 3 profit. Of
Yeah.
course, Jor might not be thinking about the fact that a planet's worth of Kryptonians suddenly getting powers on Earth might not be so great for the human race. But that's a story for Superman
Oh,
Adventures.
he
which,
wasn't actually
further
planning
down the
on.
line.
He wasn't necessarily planning on taking them all to Earth. That was just what he
Mhm.
planned for Kal-El.
Well, for Cal, yeah,
Yeah.
that might be the fallback position. But he was like,
Right.
we can take them somewhere. We can get out, and the council is just like, you want us to go in there with our most dangerous criminals? You're out of your mind. And of course, they all worship the
Mhm.
one figurehead, topical, that can provide them with all the answers in the form of Brainiac. And of course, Brainiac, it turns out, who knew that combining Brain and Maniac might
Mhm.
lead to a computer program that might not be beneficial? So great. Yeah,
I do love that they tied Brainiac to Krypton in this. Like
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't like the whole telepathic Brainiac thing they did in the early 90s. The whole but I love this idea of Brainiac as this like rogue AI who's trying to gather intelligence on all available worlds and all that, and tying it into Superman's origin and Krypton. I thought that was a really nice move. It was a really interesting way to do that. I'm not sure how I feel about him intentionally misleading the council, because I think then we're starting to get into territory of almost not necessarily he's not directly responsible for Krypton's explosion, but he's helping it along, and I prefer it to be just more.
Well, the thing about Brainiac in that
Brainiac
moment,
was actually wrong in that moment. Like maybe he was wrong about it himself.
the thing about Brainiac's reasoning in that moment is that he is aware of Krypton's plight, but he knows that it's too late. Like,
Yeah.
there's no point. Like, and if he were to try to help the Kryptonian people, they would have him waste time when he needs to get off the planet. And
Right.
in his estimation, like he is the sum repository of all Kryptonian knowledge. And so he's just like, look, sorry, y'all, but I'm out. I'll see you later.
I totally understand his motivations. I'm just saying from my perspective, just from the storytelling point, I don't like the idea that the supervillain is somehow helping along this destruction. I prefer it to be just like completely unconnected from. I always hate those stories when they go back to Krypton and they're like, this was the villain who was responsible for it. I never like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Krypton does not need a murderer.
Right.
Krypton is just a natural tragedy. It's just something that happened. Now, could you argue that you could maybe reconfigure it a little bit and just be like, well, Brainiac was doing his biannual upload into the satellite network and then saw that Krypton was exploding and it was just like, well, nothing I can do, and just left.
I would just put it at like, I would say that, if I was rewriting this, I would say that Brainiac sincerely believed that it was shifting the orbit and all that, and it wasn't actually going to lead to the destruction. And that Brainiac is actually wrong. Because I think that also enhances Jor-El's character too. The fact that he was smarter than the machine. And that also gives Brainiac a reason to hate Kal-El too. Because it's like this whole thing of like, you know what? The only person who ever outsmarted me was your father.
Yes, absolutely. The one who got a one-up on me.
Right. And I think that also gives like Brainiac a kind of personal motivation. I think that would be that's how I would do it anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a case you could argue for that, sure. Yeah, definitely. And the whole escape from Krypton is a pretty powerful scene. Like Shirley Walker's music as they launch Baby Kal-El into space, and the planet just blows up, and there's that great line from Tony J playing Sev M. I think that's his name, but the fact that soldiers have like corraled him because they thought he was Jor-El escaping in a hovercraft. And so one of the soldiers is like, what is this, another one? And then Sev M is just like, no, the last one. And then the planet just explodes. And it's one of those moments where you realize that, like the episode goes to show that Krypton was a nice place. There were good people there, and they were all destroyed because you just watch as the planet just turns into this huge fireball of expanding green flame, and then there's that great image of like the rocket moving through the cloud and then bursting free, and then all these kryptonite rocks, like Superman is surrounded with death and then escapes into hyperspace. It's a great sequence, and I like the fact that the rocket doesn't crash; it actually just lands. Because of course they wouldn't strap their baby into a rocket and just hope for the best. They'd have some kind of automated navigation system that's like, okay, this is a good spot to touch down. We're just gonna land nice and gentle. Like, yeah, it's such a great sequence.
You mentioned the theme, and I want to talk about the theme because I thought it was interesting how Batman the Animated Series used the Danny Elfman theme from the movies. And I never realized it before. But then last night it just hit me. I'm like, wait, why didn't they do the John Williams theme for this series then as the opening?
I think that's one of those things where like Shirley Walker had originally composed the theme for Batman the Animated Series. It's actually the theme for Mask of the Phantasm. Like there's a shorter version that was originally on the soundtrack album that was supposed to be the one that would run at the top of the show. I think with this one, Walker was given the chance to just go for it. This was her thing, and I think Elfman at the time, he was of the. I think no, this is a tale told out of school, so take it with a grain of salt the size of your desk. But apparently, he was under the impression that Batman the Animated Series was going to be a prime time animated series, and so he would be looking at a lot of residuals for doing the opening theme.
Right.
So he composed it and put it together for that, and then of course it went to daytime TV, and that's where history happened.
Oh, it was I thought it was the same theme from I thought it was the exact same theme from the Batman '89.
No, it's actually kind of a riff on it. Like the actual Batman the Animated Series. He composed an individual piece of music for it that's kind of thematically similar, but just different enough to get a 60 to 90 second blurb for the
right. Oh, okay, that's interesting. I never knew that. I always thought it was the exact same thing.
Again, don't take me as gospel.
Right. But yeah, so I always thought that, and but the Walker theme though is so evocative of the Williams theme.
It's great because it does the same thing that John Williams does. It says Superman in the title.
Well, even it has that. Yeah. It even has that. Like in the Williams theme, they've got that. Right, but they also have that when it goes slow and it has like that kind of like it has the same thing here. The same exact thing. It's like timed almost exactly. It's just different notes, but it's the exact same structure basically.
Yeah, because Walker was probably like, well, everybody like John Williams already did it as good as it can get done. So let me just do a riff on that theme. But she's designed that, like when she did the Justice League theme, she gave every hero their own distinct theme. There's a lovely video someone did when unfortunately she passed away, where they incorporated all the themes that she'd done for all the heroes. Each one, like the Flash gets one, Wonder Woman gets one, Green Lantern. It's all great. Like she really composed it to capture the essence of each character. And with Superman the Animated Series, it's big, it's bombastic, it's confident in a way that the Batman the Animated Series theme is more dark and kind of brooding.
Right.
Her version on it, yes, just so good.
Yeah. See, and I think she touched on something that I think every one who makes a new Superman theme needs to keep in mind, is that it needs to have that, like I think it was who did Zimmer did the score for Man of Steel. Decent enough music, but it doesn't have that bombastic thing where I'm like, if you're making a Superman theme, you don't have any horns in it, I think that's a problem.
Exactly. Like, don't get me wrong, I like the drums, I like the riff, but Superman, when he shows up, that's when it's like, oh yeah, we're in for a show now, because here you go. Like, that was the one moment in Justice League where I popped. And when he showed up in the Whedon cut of Justice League in the full gear and the score kicked in, I popped like a WWE fan. I was ready. Let's go.
The treatment of Superman in the Whedon cut, that is the only reason why I hold it above the Snyder cut, is just its treatment of Superman.
It edges out a little because Whedon, much like with Captain America, he gets Superman. He understands Superman. I'm like, no disrespect intended to Zack Snyder. He's there to play, and he did his Elseworlds, and there's no beef, there's no hatchets, but an objectivist can't really understand an altruist in the same way, you know? Exactly. I mean, he tries, but it's just not quite there. That's just me, though.
Well, no, this is a different discussion, but
exactly.
Adam and I talked about this when we talked about Man of Steel, where it's like there's so much in there. It's like you're so close, but then you get into like the I let my father die part of it, and then it's just like, okay, now you're now you're losing the plot.
Objection, Your Honor. Objection. Yeah. There's absolutely there's a dozen ways you could save him, but that's not where we meet the Kents here, and they are absolutely adorable.
Yeah. Well, another thing too. One of the things I liked about the Byrne revamp is that they showed that Clark's abilities are developing naturally as he grows up. I think they kind of rushed that a little bit here, and I know it's probably because of the time constraints, but it's just like one day, all of a sudden, boom, he can do all these things out of nowhere. And I think I would have liked a little bit more, some sort of reference to the fact that there had been some build up to this stuff before that.
Yeah, like in the actual comics, you do see that at one point, like Clark is chasing a puppy out into the cornfield, and Jonathan accidentally hits him with the combine thresher, and it's just like, oh God, Clark, and there he is, just fine.
Yeah.
His clothes are a little rumpled, but he's okay. And like there's another bit where like, hey, your purse is in the other room, Ma, and it's just like, well, how did you know that? Because he looked through the wall. You start to see the powers develop gradually, and I think that also with Man of Steel, they kind of jumped the gun on that too, because all the super senses just hit Clark at once.
I think it was pretty good because they'd done I think maybe they did overwhelmed it too much at one point, but I did like the way they kind of rolled those out a little bit.
Yes, and I do think that it develops
gradually.
I think
Smallville did a great job of that, right? They had the ability, they had the benefit of 22 episodes a season, so you could do it, but still, like that whole idea of like, okay, so he's in high school now, he can run really fast, he's pretty strong. That I think it would have worked better if you'd had some sort of hint of this stuff already being there instead of all of them just suddenly developing in one day.
Yeah. If it were me, and if I were redoing Superman the Animated Series for a new generation, I would get us to the point where he is in the Grant Morrison Action Comics run with Rags Morales, where he starts off able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. He runs really fast. He's next to indestructible, but he's not quite there yet, and he hasn't figured out that he can actually fly.
Have you read Superman Smashes the Klan?
oh hell yeah.
That they did a really good thing in that too, where they had the
Mhm.
they had the Golden Age Superman where he was less powerful, and then they had this, and it was part of his character arc. Whereas
Yeah,
as
yeah.
he accepts more about his lineage and all that, his powers develop more. I really liked how they did that there.
Yeah, and there's the bit where he runs on the telephone wires. That's
Mhm.
how he gets
Yeah.
across Metropolis so fast. I was like, that is genius. That is just genius. Like, oh man, a good hero like just knocked it out of the park with that,
Mhm.
Mr. Blue Yang. Such a good one.
God,
Such a good one.
brilliant story. Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
you talk about it, an animated adaptation that
I know.
we need.
I was just
Like,
about to say the exact same thing. We need an animated,
oh man,
an adaptation of that. We need,
just in
and
that animation style. Oh my god.
also
Can you imagine?
Superman Up in the Sky that
Oh,
Tom
yeah.
King did. That one we definitely need
Yeah.
an adaptation
Yeah,
of that.
that'd be a good one. Yeah. Me and King sometimes we're not always on the same page, but that one I'm like, all right, that'll do, King. That'll do.
Although one of the things I did like about what they did here is, and my problem with the Byrne stuff is, Superman's kind of abusing his powers in high school, right? He's becoming, and I know later on he says, well, my powers didn't develop
Yeah.
until, I'm like, come on, really,
But
Clark?
you're still a brick
You're
wall,
still
dude.
you're still winning all the trophies, and your powers never developed before, you think? Come on.
Yeah. But I do think that bit serves the purpose because Jonathan has to take him aside and go, look, man, you are not from around here, and these abilities that you have, they're great, but you're using them to make people feel down. Like you're using it to put yourself forward. And that version of Clark needs to learn that first lesson. Like when he encounters the rocket, and more importantly, the kryptonite embedded in the rocket, that's where he starts to understand that he's got some limits, like even subconsciously. And there's that great bit that pays off later with John Corbin, aka Metallo, who's also in this, played by the incredible Malcolm McDowell, who crushes it. Like such smarm. Like love to see him. And again, as I was talking about earlier, the seeds that are paid off later.
Oh yeah.
When Corbin comes back and undergoes his metamorphosis, he becomes one of the more tenacious villains on the show. He just wants to kill Superman because Superman, in his eyes, took everything away from him and Luthor.
Oh yeah, so, I think of this is my favorite depiction of Brainiac and my favorite depiction of Metallo. Like this show did such a good job of, first off, establishing those characters very early on, tying them to different aspects of Superman's origin story. Brainiac with Krypton, Corbin with Superman's first big adventure in Metropolis, and then bringing them back later. I thought that was brilliantly done, the way they'd worked them in.
Yeah, and the genius of it is Corbin's origin makes him a threat to both Superman and Lex.
Yes.
And actually gives them a common enemy that they have to team up and defeat. Because, Corbin is just such a relentless machine, literally, at this point.
Yeah.
And in this one where he gets the Lexoskel and is just like wrecking shop. It's a nice forerunner for what will eventually happen because he is the man in the machine.
Which we also saw in the Morrison Action Comics too.
Absolutely, yeah. That was a great variation on it. So yeah, this is just such a this 3-parter holds together real well. I watched it before.
Yeah, it does a really good job of setting the scene and everything. Like most of the stuff I have with it are minor quibbles here and there. Like I would shorten the Krypton sequence, and I would probably divide up the Krypton and Smallville sequence. Instead of having it all Krypton, all Smallville, all Metropolis, I would have jumbled it up a little bit more.
Okay.
And had like, I'd open it up like that when they're in Metropolis and they're interviewing all the people and about like this flying man and all that. That's actually how I would open the episode. The movie, right? I would flash back to these other things.
Absolutely. Like we get to know Clark, and at certain stages we flash back a little further and a little further. And then, maybe he's revisiting Mon Pod and goes into the barn and we get the flashback to the, to the ship.
Yeah.
And we get that moment because that was an interesting thing where Lara puts away the little holographic interface that gives Clark a chance to meet his biological parents, which is just so touching because Clark's heart is absolutely broken because up until this point, he's thought he was adopted, but he just thought he was a normal kid. And then he finds out, oh, not only are you not human, but you are the last member of your species.
Mhm.
And all of that just gets dropped on Clark's shoulders like a ton of bricks. Like you understand why he shatters that beam post, because he can't deal with it. And his parents want to support him, but they can't reach him in that moment. It takes the discovery of his flight to kind of make him come to terms with the fact that his heritage isn't necessarily all bad. So
another thing I really liked about the Smallville sequence was they established that Clark is very intelligent, right? Right from the start, they're like, it's like, oh, another A for the boy genius. I'm like, I love that, because I think so often Clark's intelligence is undermined.
Everybody just sees him as the flying brick. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And the fact that he's a really smart guy, and I'm glad that they didn't shy away from that. They just went right into it right away. I like that part of it too, because that's something that's so often overlooked.
Yeah, he's been that way.
I think even Smallville made that mistake. I think they tried to play him up a little bit too much as just more of a, not necessarily a jockey type, but he wasn't like, Chloe was the brains of that show, right?
Basically,
and I think which and the whole Allison Mack thing aside thing, I hate that character. I've always hated that character.
Yeah, not one of my favorites.
Yeah.
But the genius and intellect and Hercules and strength has been with him since the 1930s. And there's that wonderful bit in Superman Batman where it's like, Batman asks Clark, like, how did you know to come here? And it's like, it's called investigative journalism. Which I always like. Like, Superman is not quite the genius that his father was, but I do think that he takes mostly after his mother, who was a test pilot. Like, she's quick-witted. Like, he can put things together quickly and solve problems. Like, so that's one of the reasons that Superman always has, like, in the comics, there's always an inventive use of his powers. Like, I'll reflect my heat vision off this and hit that, and then, do that kind of stuff. Superman thinks on his feet, and everybody just tends to think of him as just this brick wall that just knocks through things and knocks things down. And I'm not saying that's not a fun time. I enjoy watching Superman beat up giant robots and, kryptonite visioned gorillas as much as the next guy. But, he's also a clever opponent, and he's pretty clever in this one too. Like, he gets some moments dealing with these bad guys, which are pretty clever uses of his power.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Although I think some of the investigative side of things, it felt like that side of thing didn't quite work well. Like, he sees the Kasnian flag in the photo Jimmy shows him, and he just figures out, okay, so Lois must be there now, so I'm gonna go as Superman. I mean, I thought that was kind of a leap in logic. I think I would have liked a little bit more investigative actions there.
Exactly, yeah, but we got a limited time. But I get it. Like, I would love, and one of the things that one of my favorite episodes that features like Clark as the investigative reporter is the episode further down the line, The Late Mr. Kent.
Yes, I was thinking of the exact same thing.
Great episode where he, in his narration, he's like, I wanted the win as Clark. I wanted the win as Clark. So he like drives in a car and he goes to investigate the guy on death row. And then, of course, when the car gets blown up, he's in a situation. But he is that investigative journalist he's within the cusp of getting this guy off of death row. And that's when the corrupt dude steps in and tries to kill him. Like, he is a decorated investigative journalist and also a published novelist if you read the comics. So he's a guy who has, there's a lot going on up there. It's not just,
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about that. I think that might be my favorite episode, because
it's
that
pretty
is
good.
If not my favorite, it's definitely up there. But it's so memorable because, and one of the things I like about it is that it shows that journalism is not just this thing Clark does as part of his mask or to keep his ear to the ground, right? It's something he actually likes doing. It's his actual calling. And just like the whole fact about like him, and I love the aspect of that this series touches on, the fact that he had traveled the world, being like, that's if I was doing a Superman reboot, like what I would do is I would definitely establish Clark as a conflict journalist, traveling around the world, being in all these different hot spots. And because I think that's one of the things I think Man of Steel missed the boat on, where they had him traveling the world, which I like that, but they didn't have him doing the journalism stuff. Right.
Yeah,
it was just kind of like, it's just at the end of the movie, he's like, well, I need a job where I can keep my ear to the ground. And that's Silver Age Superman. You don't need that in the modern day.
No, not when everybody has a cell phone.
Exactly.
You got the world in your back pocket.
Right. So
Um,
it has to be, if you're going to have Clark as a journalist, it has to be something he actually loves doing. It's something he has to be called towards, I think.
yeah, and during that period where he's wandering, like he is a conflict journalist, and
Mhm.
weirdly enough, all those conflicts suddenly get derailed for some reason.
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah.
a series of weird accidents that happen that slow things down for the
Again,
oppressive force.
Birthright, right? They handle that brilliantly.
Absolutely, having him, travel the world and realize that maybe I want to be vegan because I see everything has a life force around it. That's really uncomfortable for me. Like very interesting stuff in that series, and this one, like I just appreciate that Clark manages to balance both the superheroics. Like Pa says it best. Like Pa Kent says it best. Like Clark Kent is there to help out, but Superman shows up every once in a while and he can take care of some things. You'll
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
juxtapose the two lives. Which
I also
think is
like the note about, Martha saying, I don't want people thinking you're like that nut in Gotham.
that's delightful. That was one when I first watched it, that made me bark out laughing. Like it's just such a good little and it establishes that yes, Superman and Batman share the universe.
Right.
So
well, it was funny that was happening at this time, because at this time they were on different networks, so there was
absolutely, yeah.
there was no possibility of a crossover back then. So it was nice that even back then they were thinking, well, maybe if we just plant a little seed here, it might have something later on.
And then they would one of the arcs of the show is eventually introducing people that will show up later in Justice League. Green Lantern, we got Aquaman, we got the Flash, like just really, really fun stuff. And in these episodes, so many guns are hung on the wall in advance of what we're eventually going to get. And I think that's super great. And just so good. This show is, I can't stress it enough. It's so good.
Well, the last thing I wanted to talk about is Tim Daly, his performance as Superman. So like, I love his Superman. I think one of the issues I have is I'm not noticing a whole lot of differentiation between the way he voices Superman and the way he voices Clark.
Yeah, you would think that the disguise may fool people, but surely Lois Lane is not so thick as to not recognize the difference in voices. So I think George Newbern, I think he did pretty well with the differentiation. I think his Clark had a little more of a higher register when he played the character. But
I can't recall his Clark, so I can't remember.
His Clark is a blink and you miss it, because Clark isn't largely involved in the proceedings. I think my main memories of that are when they're on the run during the Thanagarian invasion.
Right.
So there's some bits with him disguised as Clark. But I think that, with Tim Daly, I think the portrayal, I think it's largely just a decision that they made where it's like, well, George Reeves didn't have to differentiate his voice when he was Clark Kent and Superman. So I guess they were kind of trying to play to that. And I get it. I mean, they couldn't really have him be too higher register or just, clumsy Clark, like that sort of thing. They wanted to convey a different Clark for a different time.
Yeah. But I think they could have done something more. Like it's just, especially when you look at what Conroy did with Batman and Bruce Wayne, how he differentiated the two.
Oh yeah. I think that was just it was either just a decision from the producers or maybe just a conscious decision on Daly's part.
Yeah.
But again, his portrayal of the characters is just that the disguise is just mainly in the service of just like, let me help people, let me do my investigative journalism, and if people figure it out.
I feel like a lot of actors don't put the same emphasis on that difference between Clark and Superman that they would put on the difference between like Batman and Bruce Wayne, because you see this happen. It's not just Daly. It happens with a lot of actors. Like, Dean Cain didn't really differentiate. Well, Dean Cain was basically cardboard as Superman anyway. So, but even like outside of Brandon Routh, like even, Henry Cavill and Tyler Hoechlin, I love both of them. Cavill got shortchanged, but the bad script, but even still, and like Hoechlin as well, they don't do much differentiation between Superman and Clark.
I think with Hoechlin's Clark is just very enthusiastic and very and very bright, whereas his Superman tends to be a little more grounded, a little more calm, a little more sedate. I think that if I had to guess, I think that Clark really likes being Metropolis Clark, because then he can just really lean into his inner goober and just be just absolutely, you know,
That is
be
something I love about Tyler
Yeah.
Hoechlin's Clark. He's such a dorky dad.
he is such a dork dad, and he loves every second of it. Like, he loves being the dad with the dad jokes and like
Yeah.
kiss me on the chef. Like, he would have that barbecue apron ready to go. Like, he is his Superman, his Clark Kent, like his Clark, for lack of he loves being human. Like, he loves his life with his wife and kids. Like, he's very into that. He's very enthusiastic. In a way that makes his Clark Kent into the mild-mannered, clumsy doofus that we all know and love. With the daily portrayal, it's a bit of a different animal, but I do appreciate it.
It's funny now that I'm getting older, and there are all these different I'm finding there are different aspects of different performances that I like in different contexts of Superman. Like Christopher Reeve, I think works great as like the Superman before he has any other kind of connections, like with Lois or anything like that. Like, he's when he first comes to Metropolis and all that. And I look at someone like Hoechlin, and I'm like, well, okay, this is the rebirth era Superman, right? When he's married to Lois, he's got the kids. Like, that's, I can't imagine Christopher Reeves in that role as well as I can imagine Tyler Hoechlin.
Yeah. His Superman has, for lack of a better term, big dad energy. His Superman's great. And the beauty, like what you said, you really kind of captured lightning in the bottle there. It's very much, Superman is like this character that's very much like a diamond. Like, you catch the light in certain ways. That all the interpretations kind of build and level on each other in such a way that makes the character really fascinating after like 80 years.
Oh yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to mention about Last Son of Krypton?
Last Son of Krypton. Like, it is a real favorite of mine. I rewatched it before we recorded, and I have to say that as both a self-contained sort of its own experience, and as the beginning of the Superman the Animated Series proper, I really think it's great. And I also wanted to point out that this series came out in 1996, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. It got here way before Iron Man and offered us our first post-credit bump in a superhero show.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which brings it when Brainiac makes his debut in the flesh, as it were, with those poor aliens. Like, you're just like, oh boy. Oh yeah, I've almost forgotten in the midst of all this swashbuckling super adventure. This is an Alan Burnett, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini joint. You might want to buckle up, because here comes some stuff. And it starts to build from there. The next episode is A Little Piece of Home, which introduces...
and that next episode is the Toy Man. And then the Little Piece of Home is the one after that.
Little Piece of Home is the one after that. Oh man, we didn't even talk about the Toy Man. Like, you talk about redesigns.
Yeah.
Oof, that one is genuinely creepy. And I think that one...
Well, that was also such a... Because especially when you were looking at what Toyman was being done with at the comics at the time, because that was when he was in that was when he was in child murder mode and all that. So
and then they established that, like, Jeff Johns had to come in and go, no, that was an android that was specifically malfunctioning. Here's the real Toyman. We're all cool. We're all cool. But yeah, the design and the way he speaks, and like the storybook and all that. Oh my God.
I think that is the creepieest Toyman, right? Is like
that is the creepiest Toyman. Like, why hasn't that one made like the jump to like? I know like
there was because like when Jeff Johns had done 1 year later, I think it was, there was like a Toyman, but it later was again an android or something like that.
Comics, everybody.
Yeah.
Comics and comics shows. So yeah, but really great redesign, and most of the villains, and also like never really got a chance to touch on it because she's not involved in this episode. But Livewire is also the second character to make the move from the animated series to the comics page. So both of these series had their impacts in various.
Well, they also had and you had Harley Quinn, and then you had Livewire. You also had Mercy Graves, Mercy Graves showed up. Basically, you're updating the whole idea of Lex Luthor having like a Gal Friday or like a right-hand man but instead of Miss Teschmacher and Otis, who are, bumbling comic relief, you've got this cool, confident, badass who can break your fucking arm.
exactly, can hold her own.
Yeah.
And in the comics was an Amazon for some
Yeah,
reason.
yeah. It was her and
There you go.
her sister. I can't remember her name. They're both
Yeah,
Amazons.
yeah. Mercy and Hope or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Great stuff. Great stuff. I mean, this series, if anyone hasn't watched it, and our whistle stop tour of it kind of jumped all over the yard, but if you want to watch it, I would highly recommend it. It kind of got lost in the shadow of its predecessor and also its successor when Justice League rolled around. But it's so good, and it ends on such an interesting note in that the stuff we see at the beginning of this episode was like, yeah, big guy, you're the best, go for it. And then when Darkseid brings it all crumbling down around him, like, it's so good. The arc of those 4 seasons, just amazing stuff. I would recommend it most highly to anyone. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, seek it out post haste.
Was it 3 seasons?
Oh, I think it was 3 seasons. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Yeah, it was 3 seasons. I'm sorry.
Justice League was 4 seasons, I think.
Justice League
with because it had
because then
Justice
because
League
it was
and then
Justice
Unlimited.
League Unlimited. Yeah.
Right.
Ugh, the dating is all over.
Yeah. Batman 2 was basically 4 seasons. Like because the first season was daily. So it was like 60 episodes in the first season. And all the other seasons are like 10, 12 episodes.
Pretty much, yeah. The first season was like, this is for syndication. It's like the real Ghostbusters. The first season is like 60 episodes, and you're like, whoa, let's all take a breather here. But really great stuff in those. So,
but yeah, I mean, well, that first season did such a great job of, and the fact that it was all these, because you could watch that, it's got a Simpsons-esque quality to that, like that, or Seinfeld, where you could put it on, if you have them synced up in some app or something, and you put it on random, you'll never get lost, right? Because each episode is very self-contained.
Absolutely, and this is pretty similar to that. There's not really a lot of episodes that carry over from each other. So.
Pretty similar. There's a little bit of carryover, like when after he defeats Brainiac and he gets the fortress stuff and all that.
Right. Yeah. And the final arc, which is of course when it all hits the fan. So and sets the stage for Justice League and the George Newbern trail.
Although I will say that one of the things I didn't like about, because I've been thinking about this a lot, because every time people talk about when Man of Steel defenders are defending that, they always bring up the Superman Shazam episode of Justice League Unlimited.
Yes, the Clash.
Yeah. I fucking hate Superman in that episode. I hate what
Superman is a gigantic dick in that
He's
episode.
such a dick, and he is just so petty and just like, I'm just like, I don't blame Shazam at all for not wanting to join the team.
No. I am on the same page as Captain Marvel. Please hit him again.
Yeah. Because he's just, I hated what they did to Superman in that episode.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I don't mean to cast aspersions on the writers of the show, but they obviously had to have him be aggro so we get to the point where they fight.
Yeah,
and I do think it ties in a lot to the fact that, Lex is on Superman's case all the time, but he's doing it in such a passive aggressive way and slowly keeps pushing him because he wants him to snap and get to that Justice Lord place, because he'll finally have the excuse to take out the alien that he's hated all these years.
Right.
So he's totally working a psyop on Superman. So but I understand. Like, I understand the pullback from it, because that speech that Captain Marvel gives, that's pretty much the speech that I would give to Superman if he was acting like that. Like,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
I mean, I love Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, but that the portrayal of Superman is something that sticks with me, especially in that episode.
Yeah, that's the one sore point. That's the thing that, like, they were kind of moving into kind of a Squadron Supreme territory.
Yeah,
they were kind of exploring, like, are these characters going to become the Justice Lords? And they kind of, like, they threaded those plots a little bit, but then they ultimately had to let it go, because if they become the Justice Lords, I mean, the whole show's over, right? What are we gonna do? Jump to another Earth? So,
but and that's like, I'm so tired of those Superman gets corrupted by power.
Now stay with me. What if Superman was totally evil? That's a radical idea that's never been done before. God. Oh boy.
It's the most annoying story, most annoying repetitive story that everybody thinks is original.
I know, right? And it's just like, look, I get it. And I'm not saying that you can't tell good stories with that. I mean, I initially, when I first heard of the Injustice game, I was like, miss me with that. Absolutely miss me with that. But then the nice young man Tom Taylor wrote that series.
Yeah.
And the comic is actually good.
Yeah,
and
when
it explains
when I read a review of that first issue, and they talked about
Mm.
how Superman and was brainwashed into killing the Joker, basically, or tricked and all that, and I'm like, this is, you don't have to do that. That sounds ridiculous. But it was the same thing with Superior Spider-Man, right? When I heard about that, I'm like, that is the best fucking idea I've ever heard in my life. And then I read it, I'm like, oh wait, no, this is actually really
This
good.
is actually genius.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting. Like Superman as an antagonist figure is understandable because as we've grown up and as we've matured to a greater or lesser extent, we become suspicious of people in power,
Right.
even the fictional ones.
Right. But I like my preferred idea is like not power corrupts, but power reveals. And I think I want to see more stories that focus on that. And I think that's a good way to show the difference between Superman and Lex, right? Superman has all this power and he uses it for good. Lex has all this power in a different way and he uses it for corrupt purposes.
Oh yeah, like that last scene in the episode where in the trilogy where, Superman shows up after defeating John Corbin and, the whole thing was an elaborate ruse to get this weapons to Casnia so that Luthor could line his pockets. And then Luthor opens the window and just basically lays it out to Superman like, look, my technology built this city. My will runs it, and 2/3 of these people work for me, whether they know it or not. And how about you help me take this operation global? I could make it very much worth your while. And Superman is just floating there, the whole time, with his arms crossed, just staring at him. And then finally he cracks, and then he throws the thing at him. It's just like, I'll be watching you, Luthor, and just crushes it and takes off. And that to me is just like their juxtaposition, like. Lex used to be the king of the hill, and now he's not anymore. And so that whole bit where he's like, I'm not finished with you. And so, that builds their relationship and really starts the whole juxtaposition. And that's the kind of Superman that I like, where he's this moral exemplar who points true north. That's my take on Superman.
Yeah. Well, I like that. Taking it back to Supergirl and to Superman and Lois, when he confronts John about the fact that John's storing kryptonite, and it's like, and in a second he goes from like, nice, friendly Superman, everybody gets along with everybody, to being like very stern and serious. I love that. And also when he has a similar type of thing with Sam, and he tells Sam afterwards, he's like, you know what, about those kryptonite weapons. Sam's like, I know, I'm gonna destroy them. He's like, no, don't. And I'm like, that was. That's Superman understanding that need for it.
Exactly. He understands the need for contingency. In the comics, it's great because he takes Luthor's kryptonite ring and gives it to Batman. He's like, look, someday I could go insane. I could be mind controlled. I need to know that if things get bad, there's somebody out there with the power to put me down if it's that bad. And like, that's the beginning of when they truly start to become like brothers, because they're bonded over that. So good stuff.
Okay. All right, Stacy, well, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Well, you can find me on the Fanboy Power Hour podcast. We release every Wednesday. My brother Ryan and I, we sit down, we talk about geek culture. And you can also find me on Twitter at StacyHD, STACY, H is in Harold, D is in David. And I just mostly post about nerdy stuff there too, and talk about whatever's on my mind. So by all means, feel free to swing by.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. Always fun when you have you on back.
Yeah. World's finest, everybody. Keep an eye out for it.
Well, actually, we already did that. We did that one already.
Oh, you did that one already?
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah.
But
that
it's real good.
That was one of the first episodes we did with the new format after Derek's passing.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. But watch this space. I'm sure we'll end up talking about
We'll definitely have something else. Yeah. All right. That does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. SuperheroCinephiles.com is the website. Super Cinema Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget, you subscribe to the Patreon. You get these episodes a week in advance. And you also get access to the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club companion podcast. And all that's at patreon.com/superherocinephiles. Thanks so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time. If you enjoyed the Superhero Cinephiles, then you'll also love my companion podcast, the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club. All my Patreon subscribers get access to this exclusive podcast where I review superhero comics and graphic novels. Not sure what comics you want to read next or what you should dive into? I've got you covered on that. I'll be doing reviews, recommendations, and also talking to you about useful entry points if you're interested in reading some comics but don't know where you should start. Plus, you'll get access to all episodes of the main show a week before everyone else. on all of this for as little as just $1 a month. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/supercinemapod, and you can sign up at any subscription amount to get started. Thanks so much for your support, and please don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.